In the Buddha's own words, the middle-length Discourses of the Buddha. Sutra 14. The shorter discourse on the mass of suffering. Thus have I heard. On one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country at Kapilavatthu in Nigroda's park. There, Mahanama, the Sakyan, went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and said, Venerable Sir, I have long understood the Dharma taught by the Blessed One thus. Greed is an imperfection that defiles the mind. Hate is an imperfection that defiles the mind. Delusion is an imperfection that defiles the mind. Yet while I understand the Dharma taught by the Blessed One thus, at times states of greed, hate, and delusion invade my mind and remain. I have wondered, Venerable Sir, what state is still unabandoned by me internally, owing to which at times these states of greed, hate, and delusion invade my mind and remain. Mahanama, there is still a state unabandoned by you internally, owing to which at times states of greed, hate, and delusion invade your mind and remain. For, were that state already abandoned by you internally, you would not be living the home life, you would not be enjoying sensual pleasures. It is because that state is unabandoned by you internally that you are living the home life and enjoying sensual pleasures. Even though a noble disciple has seen clearly as it actually is with proper wisdom that sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and despair, and that the danger in them is still more, as long as he does not attain to the rapture and pleasure that apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that, he may still be attracted to sensual pleasures. But when a noble disciple has seen clearly as it actually is with proper wisdom that sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and despair, and that the danger in them is still more, and he attains to the rapture and pleasure that are apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that, then he is no longer attracted to sensual pleasures. Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, I too clearly saw as it actually is with proper wisdom, how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them. But as long as I did not attain to the rapture and pleasure that are apart from the sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that, I recognized that I still could be attracted to sensual pleasures. But when I clearly saw as it actually is with proper wisdom, how sensual pleasures provide little gratification, much suffering and much despair, and how great is the danger in them, and I attained to the rapture and pleasure that are apart from sensual pleasures, apart from unwholesome states, or to something more peaceful than that, I recognized that I was no longer attracted to sensual pleasures. And what is the gratification in the case of sensual pleasures? Mahanama, there are these 5 chords of sensual pleasure, as Sutra 13. Now this is a danger in the case of sensual pleasures, a mass of suffering in the life to come, having sensual pleasures as its cause, sensual pleasures as its source, sensual pleasure as its basis, the cause being simply sensual pleasures. Now, Mahanama, on one occasion I was living at Rajaka, on the mountain Vulture Peak. On that occasion a number of Nakathas, living on the black rock at the slopes of Izagali, were practicing continuous standing, rejecting seats, and were experiencing painful, raking, piercing feelings due to exertion. Then when it was evening, I rose from meditation and went to the Nagathas there. I asked them, Friends, why do you practice continuous standing, rejecting seats, and experience painful, raking, piercing feelings due to exertion? When this was said, they replied, Friend, the Nigantha Nataputa is omniscient and all-seeing, and claims to have complete knowledge and vision thus. When I am walking, or standing, or asleep, or awake, knowledge and vision are thus continuously and uninterruptedly present to me. He says thus, Nigathas, you have done evil actions in the past, exhaust them with the performance of piercing austerities. And when you are here and now restrained in body, speech, and mind, that is doing no evil actions for the future. So by annihilating with asceticism past actions, and by doing no fresh actions, there will be no consequence in the future. With no consequence in the future, there is the destruction of action. With the destruction of action, there is the destruction of suffering. With the destruction of suffering, there is the destruction of feeling. With the destruction of feeling, all suffering will be exhausted. This is the doctrine we approve of and accept, and we are satisfied with it. When this was said, I told them, "But friends, do you know that you existed in the past, and that it is not the case that you did not exist?" "No, friend." "But friends, do you know that you did evil actions in the past, and did not abstain from them?" "No, friend." "But friends, do you know that you did such and such evil actions?" "No, friend." "But friends, do you know that so much suffering has already been exhausted, or that so much suffering has still to be exhausted, or that when so much suffering has been exhausted, all suffering will have been exhausted?" "No, friend." "But friends, do you know what the abandoning of unwholesome states is, and what the cultivation of wholesome states is, here and now?" "No, friend." So, friends, it seems that you do not know that you existed in the past, and that it is not the case that you did not exist, or that you did evil actions in the past, and did not abstain from them, or that you did such and such evil actions, or that so much suffering has already been exhausted, or that so much suffering has still to be exhausted, or that when so much suffering has been exhausted, all suffering will have been exhausted, or what the abandoning of unwholesome state is, and what the cultivation of wholesome states is here and now. That being so, those who are murderers, bloody-handed evildoers in the world, when they are reborn among human beings, go forth into homelessness, as Nakathas. Friend Gautama, pleasure is not to be gained through pleasure. Pleasure is to be gained through pain. For were pleasure to be gained through pleasure, then King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha would gain pleasure, since he abides in greater pleasure than the Venerable Gautama. Surely the Venerable Nikathas have uttered those words rashly and without reflection. Rather it is I who ought to be asked, who abides in greater pleasure, King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha, or the Venerable Gautama? Surely, friend Gautama, we uttered those words rashly and without reflection, but let that be. Now we ask the Venerable Gautama, who abides in greater pleasure? Then, friends, I shall ask you a question in return. Answer it as you like. What do you think, friends? Can King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha abide without moving his body or uttering a word, experiencing exclusively pleasure for 7 days and nights? No, friend. Can King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha abide without moving his body or uttering a word, experiencing exclusively pleasure for 6, 5, 4, 3, or 2 days and nights, for 1 day and night? No, friend. But, friends, I can abide without moving my body or uttering a word, experiencing exclusively pleasure for 1 day and night, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days and nights, for 7 days. What do you think, friends? That being so, who dwells in greater pleasure, King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha, or I? That being so, the Venerable Gautama abides in greater pleasure than King Seniya Bimbisara of Magadha. That is what the Blessed One said. Mahanama the Sakyan was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words.